Hello and happy Earth Day. Hi, Eli. How are you doing?
Good. How's it going, Lindsay?
Good. Happy Earth Day to you.
Happy Earth Day to you.
I just wanted to make sure we're all set up, and we are. This is the St. Louis Public Radio live stream. For the next 30 minutes, we have control of the St. Louis Earth Day live stream, and we're going to have a conversation here with my colleague, Eli Chen, who's our science and environment reporter at St. Louis Public Radio. I will say if you're watching on the virtual Earth Day website, great, wonderful. If you click the YouTube link, you can also come to our YouTube page and join the chat and ask questions if you have a question that you'd like to ask Eli. But right now, Eli, would you tell us a little bit about what kind of stories do you typically cover, and then how have the last few weeks been similar or different from that?
Yeah, so I wish my workload were more orderly. But basically, I cover like a random assortment of scientific research that's happening at universities, some animal research. I like to go out with, animal scientists out into the field. Um, and I cover a lot of different environmental issues. So right before the pandemic, I was covering some of the really severe flooding and sewer problems in Centerville, Illinois. That's like a Metro East city that is unfortunately has unfortunately been plagued by just terrible sewers for years, and it's hasn't been fixed. So I cover things like that,
Mhm.
and we were I think prepared very well for the coronavirus to come to Missouri. We were already coming up with plans as a newsroom for when the first case would happen. So, um, I was a part of those initial efforts to arrange interviews with infectious disease specialists and, try and explain how people should behave, or how should people, I guess, protect themselves from the virus. And as you know, that situation totally escalated. And I'm still reporting here and there on environmental related things, but there's just a much higher bar for it now.
I mean, that makes sense. I was wondering, how much do you feel like a health reporter right now with the
Uh,
stories?
yeah, way more so. I think this is like a weirder experience for Sarah than it is for me, Sarah Fenton being our health reporter, because now everybody's been tasked to pay attention to hospitals and how people are behaving in accordance to like stay-at-home orders and such. So um, it's sort of interesting for us at the science desk because now everybody is doing science reporting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
We've all had to become mini experts quickly.
yeah. And I think, especially with something like this, it can be sort of daunting to take on. But I think we've done that really, really well.
You mentioned that something that you were covering before this happened was flooding, and I know that's a huge issue for the bi-state region. Um, do you think you'll continue to cover flooding during the pandemic?
Uh,
As a
only if it gets really severe. So I had covered some of the concerns that the Mississippi River cities had about um, being able to address flooding if it were to happen. There was some forecasting earlier this year that suggested that major flooding could happen along like the St. Louis area of the Mississippi this spring. And right now it looks like we're expecting moderate flooding, so maybe not as severe as people predicted a few months ago. But if we were to be in a position where we had to address a disaster, I think that would be really hard on us for several reasons. One being that people need personal protective equipment, um, and some cities just can't afford that right now because they're in severe debt. after last year's long flood. I was talking to the mayor of Kimmswick in Jefferson County. I'm going to get this wrong. Um, Small town I've never been to, but they were hit hard by the flooding last year,
I
and
remember they had to cancel all the like fruit festivals and stuff that they have and pie festivals.
yeah, yeah, they the Strawberry Festival like brings in like a lot of the town's annual revenue, and they had to cancel that. And he's having to pay for PPE out of pocket for law enforcement, and
Wow.
that's just what it is. They try to get some of the flood fighting efforts reimbursed, uh, and FEMA rejected their claim, so it's not great.
So you're talking about a pot of money that's spent that would otherwise have gone to PPE for virus prevention for like
Well,
coronavirus.
not even talking about PPE, just being able to like sandbag and stuff, in case another flood were to happen. I mean, they wanted to request some funding to pay for, constructing a temporary levee and so forth. And they're not going to get that money back. So the mayor told me he's just leaving up the temporary levee. He's not taking his chances.
I imagine another storyline that we would look into is where do people go if you have to evacuate during flooding, and also during a pandemic?
Yeah, from my conversations with folks in that story, there really isn't anywhere for them to go unless a hotel gets repurposed to take people in. And that's a serious concern. Whether or not, some of these towns along the Mississippi are prepared for that, and I don't know.
Uh, can I ask you? I see all over Facebook memes about the coronavirus being great for the environment and for nature because now air emissions are cut back and the dolphins are in Venice and all of this stuff. Uh, that's the meme. And I believe that's not accurate. But I ask all of that to say, as an environmental reporter, can you help me make sense of some of this information and understand like what's real and what could have a future impact?
Yeah, I'm interested in exploring this because some of us have been, as in me, other environmental journalists, and also some environmental activists. We've been talking about the best way to deliver this narrative about the reductions in air pollution because obviously people are not driving to work right now, and they're emitting a lot less nitrogen oxide pollution. I'm tripping up my words right now,
You're
but
you're clearly exhausted after many weeks of work if like nitrous oxide can't come right off your tongue. So just wanted to say thank you for doing this with us because it's very fascinating,
it's
especially for those of us who are trying to figure out like what to make of all of this.
yeah. Today was an especially long day, but yeah. Anyway, so decreases in that kind of pollution
Mhm.
um, have gone down in several parts of the world. People have been posting stuff about Italy and China reducing emissions. I've been also looking at data for the St. Louis area, and the thing is that the message that I think that needs to get out there to people who might think that we're bettering the environment right now is that a pandemic is in no way a solution to climate change or to environmental problems. Um, this all the reductions in air pollution is a result of our behaviors, and so what do we do with that? How can we I think this is a good time to analyze how our behaviors are having an impact on the planet. So maybe not everyone has to drive to work. A lot of people have adapted to working from home. I personally wouldn't mind working from home more often, you know.
Mhm.
But that's just me because I'm an introvert. But like things like that. And also I've noticed that people are taking on a lot of like composting and home gardening projects. And it's really interesting to see people like, sort of take actions in their own way during this sort of rough time.
I mean, definitely. But yeah, I like the example of people haven't been driving to work, and so we've clearly seen like a difference in air emissions, right? And what I hear you say is that's not exactly a sign that like climate change is changing, or that will continue after people start driving to work in the future. But that maybe there is a lesson here to learn about how the behavior of rush hour traffic can affect our environment.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I don't know all the answers, to this question of like, what more can we do based on, what we're going through right now to like address environmental problems that will still be around when the pandemic is over. But I think it's something that we definitely need to explore.
Um, can I ask you a little bit about other stories that you're reporting on, like looking forward? Is there anything you can tell us about what you're reporting?
Um, Going forward, so I'm trying to figure out the best answer for the Earth Day festival crowd because right now, this goes back to your first question about how my coverage has changed.
Yeah.
And I have been assigned to cover nursing homes during this pandemic, and that's why I probably seem a little tired today. Is because I've been out covering the workers rally over at Royal Oak Nursing in Central West End. So
Wow, that's a hard story to cover. Whoa, I didn't realize.
yeah, so I was out there um, as they were like holding up signs and demanding like they get paid sick leave and if they have to quarantine and so forth. So my stories are in the near future are going to be about uh, more stuff about the pandemic and about nursing homes.
Really depressing news about nursing homes.
Yeah. I
Cool.
mean, and also, like I said, I would like to do something on how to interpret air pollution data, but that's pending that's pending approval from editors.
Well, because I did want to ask you about that. I mean, what are we learning from the pandemic in terms of how important it is to have clean water
Um, well, we need to wash our hands, right? So
and foods and items and
yeah, I mean, everyone's. I mean, I would hope that everybody is like doing the 20-second um, hand washing routine now and also frequently, but that also requires that we have access to clean water. And I also want to point out the story that that ran yesterday on air pollution.
Mhm.
So even though we're seeing these sort of temporary decreases in air pollution, we also have to worry about places or communities that have dealt with air pollution for a very long time. And so there were two examples in that story. Uh, the folks who live in rural parts of the St. Louis region, like Labadie and Festus, they live around the Ameren, Missouri power plants, and you know there have been a lot of like complaints from residents about you know how um, about how those emissions are affecting their health. Um,
Mhm.
Patricia Shuba is a really well-known activist in the Labadie area who's been sort of fighting for clean air there for a very long time. And
Yeah,
on
this
top of
is
that,
this is a story that you've been covering for a while when it comes to the region.
this topic, yeah. So I think I've been doing stories on that since. I've been the station for nearly 4 years. Oh, it'll be 4 years, like in a week or two. But
Happy anniversary.
yeah, so yeah, I've been covering these issues for a while. St. Louis has also struggled to meet standards for ozone. So that's another problem that actually affects all of us. Um, and unfortunately, there are some communities like East St. Louis, Sauget, that have been dealing with industrial pollution from sources like the Veolia incinerator.
Mhm.
And I talked to a woman who's lived out there for many years, and that incinerator is currently being investigated for mercury emissions. So that's not great. And
It can have huge implications in a pandemic where a virus targets your lungs.
yeah, so the point that I want to get around to is the fact that, if you're living around long-term air pollution, in a way your health is already weakened, your respiratory system's already weakened by this type of pollution, and that leaves you more vulnerable for to this respiratory virus. And the study from Harvard University a few weeks ago showed a very clear link between dust and soot pollution that's been occurring in a lot of these areas for years, and mortality from COVID-19.
I mean, I think that's fascinating because we've heard for years environmental activists say this pollution is going to damage our lungs, and then to now to track the number of COVID cases in places near pollution, or to see how pollution links to asthma, then links to really bad COVID-19 outcomes, has been fascinating and depressing to watch.
Yeah, definitely. In places like Metro East, there are a lot of children, and unfortunately, Black children who have asthma.
Mhm.
And asthma is one of those conditions that can make someone high risk for COVID-19.
Mhm.
So it's very complicated, but there's a lot of bad factors involved.
Well, I think it's interesting how that's one way that your beat of environment and science intersects with, on the non-health parts of coronavirus. That like the quality of our air and water really impacts how we as people handle the outbreak in our own bodies and in our communities.
Oh yeah, I mean these are fundamental things that we have or we need to live, and if we don't have access to like clean air and water, that makes us more vulnerable to this virus. So I think that's a lesson also going forward. After this pandemic, like how will our local leaders take steps to make sure that we could handle another crisis like this.
Uh, Speaking of leaders and crises, I mean, thinking about there's so many environmental decisions that we've been watching governments make, agencies make. You and I like to talk a lot about Westlake landfill and what the EPA is doing there, trying to do there.
Oh yeah.
How is everything just come to a screeching halt because we're busy with coronavirus?
Not everything. So specific to Superfund sites, I did email my contact at EPA, and he said that Westlake landfill cleanup work is still moving forward. He says that there isn't anything stalling that. But he did say that the work going on at the Superfund sites, and I want to note these are multiple sites that cover entire counties in southeast Missouri, where there used to be a lot of heavy historic lead mining. That that is that has been stalled for the time being. And if you're not, aware of this work that's happening in like Madison County, St. Francis, in a part of Jefferson, I believe. There are these Superfund sites that are the result of just, uh, I guess, lead and other heavy metals contaminating soils, and some of those soils. Some of those soils have been taken from the floodplain of some of these rivers in that area and transferred onto people's lawns without really them knowing, and which is a problem. So the
Yeah.
EPA has been trying to clean up lead pollution in some of these residential yards for some time. That is on hold right now.
Okay. Wow. Because were they able to explain, like, because they don't have the resources, or because they're busy with other stuff?
Um, they didn't go into too much detail about it. I imagine part of the reason is that they're trying to limit exposure to people, um, during this pandemic, because a lot of Superfund site work is, at least a lot of Superfund cleanup work involves a lot of interacting with people, right? You want to talk to people and who are, affected by legacy pollution. And in order to communicate about what's, in their yards and whatever, you have to go to their house. And I think that's a tough thing to do when there's a virus going around. So it's just, this is very tough because, obviously we want lead pollution out of these yards.
Vital. But we also have to protect people from being in groups and spreading the virus.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Have you worked on any non-coronavirus stories in the last month?
Oh yeah. So I managed to get one non-COVID environmental story in the last couple of weeks, and that was St. Charles, the city of St. Charles, not the county, although it is in the county. The city of St. Charles planning to build up two of their levees. So I've covered levees and flooding for a while, and just some, background. A lot of scientists that I've talked to, have really warned that, building up levees and hard structures will worsen flooding for other people. Like this is something that's often called, levee wars. One farmer raises their levee that pushes water to another person's farm, so they raise their levee. That issue has obviously gotten more complicated over the years, but yeah. So St. Charles kind of very quietly released these plans online that they were going to raise these two levees up to the 500-year flood level. And I know that's technical jargon here, but it's these are substantial increases that they're making, and they're making them so that the people behind those levees don't have to pay for flood insurance.
Mm.
It's not, I believe it's not a requirement to pay flood insurance if you are protected by a 500-year levee. So there's that. And this engineer I talked to there went on about how they want to see more development in the area, and weirdly enough, very little about protecting people from floods. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's a part of it. It was just interesting how interest in development was so much more a part of that interview than like actual flood protection.
Yeah, prevention from like the disaster that probably will come.
Yeah, so that there's the concern that St. Charles will raise these levees, and that'll push water to parts of St. Louis County, because that's how that all works.
Huh. That's how water flows, man.
Yeah.
Shout out to Kathy. Thank you for your comment. She says she's enjoying our conversation. Thank goodness.
Oh, great. Are there questions?
No questions.
Okay.
Except from me.
Yeah, I'm wondering what else to talk about.
Have you done an interview yet with the 6-foot boom pole?
No, I am one of the people in our newsroom who is very skittish about this virus. And I am, I have mostly done interviews for my desk. And so, and I think it makes sense given that I'm on like the nursing home beat.
Sure.
I ethically, I don't want to, expose, like in case I am an asymptomatic carrier, I don't want to expose somebody to the virus. And I'm also concerned of being exposed myself. And so I am doing most of my interviews here at my desk. Today was actually the first day I went out to technically report, and I was very anxious the entire time. It was to cover that nursing home workers rally that happened earlier this afternoon, and I was just
nursing home workers asking for more protections.
Yeah, so I was really nervous about
Yeah.
how close people were standing with each other. So, which is just what happens at like, media events. Like
Yeah.
people will gather, and I I don't know. It was very anxiety inducing for me.
Are you able to take steps to feel like you're protecting yourself? How do you do that?
Um, so I have cloth masks. I bought a couple from a local designer here on Cherokee Street. Um, I I mostly just stay home. I don't really go anywhere other than, my boyfriend's house, who he also, lives alone. So we feel good about that. Although if either of us got the virus, both of us would be just boned.
There's, what can you do? Um, do you use the shower cap looking things that go on the end of the microphones when you were interviewing people today?
So I actually I did not interview people at the rally. I
Oh,
what I was doing was going out to take photos. So they did a press conference through Zoom earlier today, and that's how I got tape. And I talked to my editor, and I was like, I personally don't want to stand too close to anybody, especially at a nursing home where like I think around 11 people have tested positive for the virus.
yeah.
So you know, I'm just really uncomfortable with that. So I'm happy to go and take photos from a distance.
Cool. Well, that makes me happy. I was worried that you had to go really stick your microphone in a bunch of people's faces, but it sounds like you were able to do something that kept you comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, before our photographer Carolina left, I think she was also really uncomfortable with, you know, um, taking portraits of people. And yeah, like this is an indication of how like intimate sometimes journalism can be, or like, you're often talking to people very close. And, I was taught really early on back when I was in journalism school to get as close as I could with a microphone. And now I can't really do that because, yeah, I want
Yeah,
to be safe.
especially if they're coughing or crying or emoting, right?
Right.
We do have, we've got 3 minutes left. And then the person who's coming in after us is Earthworms. Dr. Jean is going to do her nightly show. So if you're watching, stay tuned. But we do have one wonderful question in the chat from Elizabeth. Is there anti-climate change legislation or bills going through that people don't know about? And I wonder about that locally, if you know of anything like that locally. Anti-environment or climate change legislation that we should know about.
Okay. This is where it gets tough for me because I've been reporting so much on the pandemic. Um,
You have to look deep in your brain for
yeah,
for where
so
that.
I'm going to try and recall from my conversation with Ed Smith,
Yeah.
who recently took a new job at the Sierra Club.
Oh,
He had mentioned, look this up later, Elizabeth. I don't know all the details about this because I haven't been reporting on it due to the pandemic, but there's some ongoing stuff about vehicle emission standards um, that that I was told to be paying attention to at some point. Um, and
hmm.
I think also I need to check on this as well. But anything related to floodplain development, because there were some there I'm really trying to dig deep to February when I was reporting a bit on steps that were being taken to try and limit, floodplain development, which is somewhat connected to climate change. Um, I'm trying to be as specific as I can, but I also can't speak to anything with any real authority right now.
I appreciate your answer. Vehicle emissions is a really good answer. And I will say, to us, there are no bills that people don't know about because we know about them and we track them. And when they're crazy, we will report them.
Yeah.
Especially the ones that are important and could actually pass. There's plenty of legislation that goes through the Missouri legislature that's just for fun, just for fundraising.
Right. I mean, on a national level, there were some not so great things that took place last week in regards to like mercury and heavy metals emissions. coming from coal plants. Like Andrew Wheeler really gutted some Obama era regulations around that,
Hmm.
and also rejected a plan to tighten some of the particle pollution standards, and that ties directly back to that Harvard study I mentioned, because that would have probably helped, with cleaning the air, especially in communities that suffer from soot and dust pollution.
I'm going to post a link to that Harvard study in the chat
Cool.
so people can see it. Oh, and STL Earth Day commented. The Missouri Coalition for the Environment and Sierra Club Eastern Missouri Group. Oh, great. Thank you, Earth Day. Eli, at 6 o'clock, that means we're done.
Cool. I hope I didn't mess up too much.
You messed up a whole bunch. No, it was great. I very much appreciate
everyone.
Thank you for talking to us, especially on a day when you went out and reported in at this very crazy time.
Yeah, I wish I could answer people's questions more fully, but yeah, it is really next time.
Yeah, we're going to keep reporting. Okay, well, get some rest.
All right, thank you. See ya.
See ya. Okay, it's just me. Thank you so much, Sustainability at WashU. I loved this comment. I'm really loving this, as well as seeing the real people behind the reporting that I read all the time. Thank you for reading our reporting. Yeah, we are real people. We get anxious at this time, as Eli was talking about. And every night at 8 p.m., if you liked this at all, I invite you tonight at 8 p.m. and on weeknights, we do a live stream where I'll talk to the reporters about what did you do today? What was your story about today? What questions are you still following? It's also a really good time to ask questions if you have them. Thank you, Sustainability at WashU, for saying thanks. Earth Day commented in our chat. Check out Missouri Coalition for the Environment. They have a great Twitter feed too. And the Sierra Club Eastern Missouri Group. Thank you, Elizabeth, for asking a question. Thank you, Hoff, for commenting. Thank you, Timmy B, for being here and for commenting, but it's your job. He's our head honcho boss. So I'm glad to see him here though. And that, unless anybody puts in a last minute question that I see, I think what's happening now, I might not even be on the St. Louis Earth Day stream. I might just be on St. Louis Public Radio's YouTube channel. But happening next is Dr. Jean doing her earthworms, her nightly earthworm spit for Earth Day. And then I encourage you to watch the live streams tomorrow, because I believe it is Animal Day, which sounds great. So thank you very much. Happy Earth Day. Tune in to our Facebook show at 8 if you want to keep this conversation going. And any way you want to send us a comment about if you liked this, if you'd like to see more, if you'd like to hear from a different reporter, hit me up. I would love to hear about it. I would love to talk to you about it. Okay. Happy Earth Day, everybody.